Welcome again to all my children's lit students. This is episode 2 of Shank's Children's Lit Zoom show. And number of things I want to cover today. This video will, like the first one, maybe be a little bit longer than normal. I usually like to get a lot of introductory material out of the way in the first week of class, particularly in a summer class. So I have a number of different things I want to touch on today, so it might run a little bit longer like Mondays did. So please bear with me. I promise you that probably as we get more into it, the videos won't be quite as long as these first two have been. Couple of announcements. If you have not sent in or emailed me your preferences for the presentations, which I went over on Monday in Monday's video, please do that. I wanted to announce that in this video today, but there's still quite a few out, and I don't want to make that announcement until I know what everybody's going to be doing. So please email me your preferences. A number of you have turned them in already, and I have your preferences listed. And because you turned them in early or on time, you're going to get first preference. But I think we're down to about 8 or 9 people in the class, so it probably won't be too difficult to match you up with either your first or second choice. But I do need to know what your preferences are, because I just don't want to put you in a group. And I can tell, and I especially want to be able to figure it out for the picture book presentation group, because they're the ones that'll be going first. Those will be due a week from Monday. And Grace listed picture books as her top choice. So Grace, I think you can count on being in the picture book group. Kaylin had it listed as her second choice. So I'm not sure I want to give her picture books yet. So again, just if you would for me, please email me, if you haven't done it already, your preferences for the presentations. All right, like I said, a number of things I want to touch on today. I want to talk about the author profiles. I want to talk a little bit about reasons why children's books are banned and or challenged, and you read a little bit about that in the Canvas for today. That's something that's going to come up in our discussions throughout the rest of the semester, so I wanted to establish that today in the first week of class. I also want to do a very quick review of literature terms, which is a file I ask you to look over for today. Hopefully all of those or most of those are review for you and familiar to you. If you've ever taken English classes in the past, you probably ran across some of those. Those will come up in our discussions from time to time, so you need to be familiar with your basic literature terms. So I want to touch on that a little bit. Then I do want to focus on how we judge and evaluate picture books. What are the criteria we use? So this is our first genre that we are taking a look at this semester. I ask you to read about that for today. Then I'm going to explain the picture book capsule critiques assignment, which is one of the things that will be due for homework before midnight on Sunday. And I want to talk about that and explain that. And then a few other things too, including kind of previewing next week and the Hunger Games. And I am going to ask you to read two parts out of 3 of the Hunger Games for before Monday's class. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I guess the best way to get started would be to first share with you the assignment that's due before Monday's class, preferably by midnight on Sunday. And I'll come back to this at the end of class, but I will briefly touch on it to preview what we're talking about today. Okay, so, oh, by the way, we are going to have a series of numbers for, I almost forgot. A series of numbers in sequence for this video, so please take note of these. I'll give you the first number now, number 12. Number 12 is your first number, okay? Boy, I would have kicked myself if I'd gone through, if I'd gone through the whole video and then said, oh, I forgot the dang numbers in sequence. Okay, so here's what's due before the next video. Obviously, watch this video that's being posted on Thursday, June 27th. I'm actually recording this on Wednesday, but that doesn't matter. And again, take note of the numbers I mentioned in sequence and put this in the email. Otherwise, you will not get credit for the assignment. So that's my way of making sure that you did suffer through this video. Then, as I said, there are a couple of things that will be due in your email to me for Sunday night and the Monday. You will be responsible for doing the capsule critique assignment for the picture books. I previewed this a little bit on Monday. I said you might start looking for 2 picture books that you would like to do a little bit of analysis for. And so that is what this assignment is, and I'm going to talk about that today. I am going to ask you to get started reading The Hunger Games. There are 3 parts to it, which are clearly delineated in the book, by the way. I'm going to ask you to read parts 1 and 2. We're going to break up the reading a little bit. I'm not going to ask you to read the entire book for Sunday night, but the first 2 parts. And then for before Thursday's video, I'm going to ask you to read the 3rd and final part. So we're breaking up the reading a little bit. When I was planning the schedule, obviously next week we have a holiday. July 4th is Thursday. I am still going to post a video on that Thursday. And as you can see, assignments will be due the Wednesday night before the holiday. And then I decided I would make that assignment a little bit heavier than what I'm going to ask you to do from Thursday to the next Sunday, because I have a feeling people will be more busy the day or two after July 4th than the day before. I'm not sure. I don't know what your plans are, but anyway, that's how I'm sort of planning out next week. So this will be due, assignments due before midnight, Sunday, June 30th. I'm going to ask you, as I said, to read parts 1 and part 2 of The Hunger Games. And then you will see in the Canvas, there is a file called Hunger Games Questions for Parts 1 and 2. I would like you to answer those as well. And basically, what these are very, very short answer, comprehension type questions that in some cases you could just answer in a word or a phrase, or at the very most a sentence or 2. It's just a kind of a way for me, again, to make sure that you did do the reading, you did read the book, the first 2 parts. And then also when I go over and I discuss the Hunger Games in class or in the video, like I'm going to do next week, these are questions that I will go over. They help me focus on certain things that I want to make sure we cover when it comes to the Hunger Games. So read parts 1 and 2 of the Hunger Games, and then answer those. There are 30, it sounds like a lot, but you can go through them really very quickly, I would think. 30 very short answer questions about the Hunger Games. So that will also be due in that email. Okay, so you will do the capsule critiques, and you will do the Hunger Games quiz, and put them on Word docs, and then email them to me in the same email. And those will be, you'll actually have 2 quizzes due before Monday's class. All right, also, oh, and by the way, I don't know why, I'm just looking at this right now, I actually repeated this. I meant to delete that. There's also some Canvas readings that I'd like you to take a look at. The file called Myth Notes, the file called Classical Archetypes, and then also page 68 to 85 in the packet. So these are pages dealing with myth and mythology and classical mythological archetypes, and all those things we will see in the Hunger Games, and we will be discussing next week. So quite a bit to do. I kind of alerted you to the capsule critiques on Monday, so maybe some of you got a head start on that. And again, because it's like the first week of class, some of the assignments are kind of heavy, and I promise you they will be a little bit lighter as we continue. But this is what's due before midnight on Sunday. Okay, and I'll come back to this at the end of class too, just to kind of remind you. But I wanted to set this up because what I'm going to talk about today will help you prepare to do the things that I have listed here. Okay. All right. The next thing I wanted to do is I do want to talk about and assign the author profile report. And so I had you take a look at this for today. There are 2 outside reading assignments for the class. The presentation, which is worth 100 quiz points, and I went over that on Monday. And then this author profile report. If you remember on Monday, I said one of the goals of the course is for us to learn about some of the prominent authors and illustrators in the field of children's literature. And this assignment helps us do that. Like I said, we're going to have a relatively small class this semester. I think we're at about 9 or 10 people. Usually I have a class of 30 people do this. So by the end of the semester, we have like 30 author profile reports that we can look over, and they're kind of interesting to read. So there'll only be maybe 8 to 10 of them in this class over the course of the semester, but each one of you will do one of these. And I am not going to assign the author to you. I'm going to ask you to choose maybe a favorite author or illustrator that you would like to do this report for. And that would be fair game. If you have any questions about your choice and whether it's appropriate or whether it's a good one, you can email me about that. I have listed here, as you can see, after the picture of Charlie asleep, I have listed here some of the more prominent authors and illustrators in the field, both past and present. And some of the names might be familiar to you. You might see some of your favorites there. If you have another favorite author or illustrator who deals in children's works that is not listed here, and you would like to do an author report, I encourage that. The one thing I would do is I would email me and to let me know that you're doing somebody other than somebody who's listed here. Okay, and I can okay it and add it to the list too. I'm always adding to this list. Like I said on Monday, this is a field that is booming. Children's lit continues to thrive. There are new titles and new authors popping up all the time. So as you look over that list, you'll see some familiar names, I'm sure, and then some maybe you haven't heard of, maybe because they're way back in the day, or maybe it's because they're really current and they really haven't achieved notoriety yet. But anyway, so that's a pretty good list there to choose from. But as I said, if you can think of somebody else that you would rather do for your author profile, feel free to do that. Just let me know. All right, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. And there's one major change since we're doing this online that I'll talk about. But basically what I'm going to ask you to do is in a 1-page single-space type report, basically include this information about your author or illustrator. All right, so you will include the author's name and the dates. And by dates, I mean, you know, if they have passed away, you know, what was their year of birth and their year of death. Then do a little bit of research. You don't have to do a whole lot. And a lot of these authors have their own website. So you can just go on the website and use the information. But I would like you to include a little bit, or for us, a little bit of relevant, interesting background information about the author. And that might include, what kinds of books are they known for? Do they write in a particular genre? Do they write for a particular age and grade? What kinds of works do they do? Do they, are they more well known for chapter books, or do they do picture books, or do they do poetry? So what are they best known for? Also, maybe if they have, won any particular awards, maybe a Caldecott Award, which I asked you to read a little bit about for today. So give us a little bit of interesting background information about the author or illustrator. And by the way, somebody usually asks this in class, so I'll just answer it right now. You do not have to cite the information that you got. I'm just assuming you got this information from somewhere. So you don't have to cite your sources for this. Then after, and this is about a paragraph or so, I'll show you some examples in a minute, and you saw the examples in your reading. Oh, by the way, let's do a second number. Number 19. 19 is your second number. All right, so after a paragraph of basic information about the author, then list some of their works, maybe the works they're best known for. Some of these authors are very prolific and have written literally dozens of books. You don't have to list each and every book that they've ever written. If that's the case, maybe pick out, 5, 6, 10 of the more prominent or more famous or well-known works that they've done. So you don't have to list everything. You'd be surprised. Some of these, like I said, some of these people have written like 30, 40 books. So list a few. And then I have 4 stars next to this. The last part of the author profile, which should all be on one page, single spaced, is I'd like you to choose one of the works that they have written or they have illustrated, and very briefly do 2 things for me. Give me a plot summary. So what is the story about in a few sentences? And then, since we are analyzing children's literature and analyzing the criteria for different genres, I'd like you to give me an analysis of several sentences or maybe a paragraph of how it meets the criteria for children's literature in general, and then if it does belong to a certain genre, how does it meet the specific criteria for that genre in a paragraph? And I put the 4 stars next to this because I think this is the most important part of the author profile. If you have a little space at the end of the page, and particularly if you are an education major, I have EC, which means extra credit. You might list a few ideas on how you might approach teaching this work. And again, if space permits, that's not something you have to do. All right, now here's the major change, and I'll revise this later today or tomorrow. This obviously applies to a regular classroom situation, but we're online. Here's what I'd like you to do. On the day that these are due, and it's July 25th, simply email me a Word doc of your author profile. You don't have to worry about turning in a hard copy. So that would be for a classroom situation. All right, but this is still true. I will compile all of these and put them in Canvas so all of us can read the author profiles that you all have done and get a chance to learn about authors and illustrators and to kind of pique our interest in whatever. And another important note that I don't have here, but I'll say now, is remember I said the presentations, that assignment, I will also share all the presentations with you. That will be a part of the course. You are required to read each person's presentation because there may be a question on the midterm and on the final exam about the student presentations. So you are responsible for those. That's not true of the author profiles. This is just kind of a fun FYI kind of thing. So I will include these in the Canvas and make it available for everybody to read, so you can read the other 8 or 9 or 10 or however many people we have, their author profiles, but I'm not going to ask you to study them for a midterm or a final exam. All right, so try to put as much information as you can on one sheet of paper. And let me share with you now some examples of what students have done in the past. That's sometimes the best way to learn, I think. So let me get that ready for you. All right, so this is also in your Canvas under the file examples of author profiles. I thought I'd share with you 3 of them that students have done in the past. And 2 of them are really good, but I always like to share the first one to show what you want to try not to do. So this was an author profile on Cynthia Voigt, as you can see. And again, I encourage you to try to get as much information on one page as you can, single space it. The reason being is way back in the day when I first started doing this assignment, I used to actually have students make copies of their author profiles, and we distributed them to the class, and I didn't want them to have a lot of high copying charges. So I said, make sure you put it all on one page, so you only have to make, a one-page copy. And it's just kind of carried over since then, even though you now are going to be emailing them to us and doing that. I still encourage you to keep everything within one page. And this first part, remember I said the first paragraph should give some interesting background information about the author. And actually, this paragraph is pretty good. Gives her background. It lists some of the books that she's known for, awards she has won or won. And then notice I asked in the next part for you to list the works that the author is responsible for. And here is where I think she could have used the space more effectively. She could have made like 2 different lists, and it would have taken less space on the page. So a lot of wasted space here and here. And then when she gets to the part where there's analysis of a particular work by our author, Homecoming, in this case, she didn't leave herself enough space really to do an adequate job of that. All right. Not a bad plot summary. Homecoming tells the story of Dicey, et cetera, et cetera. But notice when she gets to the point where she's going to do some analysis of how the work meets general criteria and then also criteria specific to the genre. She says it's an excellent example of contemporary realistic fiction. Okay, good. And then in just about 3 sentences, rushes through that. And that's where the grade fell off a little bit for the author profile. So when you get to this part, like I said, it is the most important part. So make sure you have enough space on your page to develop a pretty good analysis of the chosen work by the author. All right, I don't know if you can read all my chicken scratching here, but as I wrote here, more analysis needed of the book, not just a plot recap. So kind of rushed and vague in this last part, and you want to avoid that. So it was out of 50 points. I gave it a 38 out of 50, which would be a C+. Now, here are 2 more, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is more along the lines of what I'm looking for. Here is one. Boy, this goes back to 2007. Wow. Anyway, this one deals with Eric Carle. As you can see, a pretty extensive background information paragraph on Carle. Then again, this was not necessary. I tried to warn against this. I mean, but like I said, some of these authors, Carle was very prolific, so he's responsible for a lot of books. But notice, there's a lot listed here, but the student turned them into 3 lists and use much less paper space, or page space, I should say. And then that left enough room to do a really good plot summary and analysis of one of Carl's books, which is The Mixed Up Chameleon. So you read that on your own. I won't read all of this, but it does a really good job of not only summarizing the plot, which I'll ask you to do, but also analyze how it meets criteria, why it's a good example of a picture book. And then the other one, a very famous book in the history of children's literature, very, very influential and still on banned and challenged book lists to this day. Leslie Newman, who's responsible for, like I said, the groundbreaking picture book, Heather Has Two Mommies. And as you can imagine, when it came out in the, I believe in the 70s or 80s, very, very controversial. But anyway, this student did a author profile of Leslie Newman, and you can see in the first paragraph, gives some background information about her, what books she's known for, awards she's won, and then a list of works, and she was very prolific as well. But notice the list is turned into two lists so that it saves space. And then that leaves enough room to do a pretty good job of both plot summary and then analysis of it as a picture book. All right, so I share the first one with you as kind of a nod to the sort of thing maybe you shouldn't do. And then here with the Carl one and with the Newman one, these are, I think, pretty strong. And again, they were able to fit a lot of information on one page. And again, that's the challenge that I'm going to ask you to do as well. Okay, so that would be the author profile assignment. And let me throw another number at you, by the way. Our third number is 31. 31. All right, so each of you will be doing an author profile on your own. All of them will be due on the 25th by email, Word document, but again, single-spaced. Try to keep everything on one page. And then when I get all of these, I'll compile all of them and put them in a Canvas file for you. And you can read what everybody else has done. But again, I won't make you responsible for this information for an exam or a quiz. Okay. So if you have any questions about the author profile or about your choice of author, the only thing I try to hope doesn't happen, and this is more likely to happen in a class of 30 than a class of like 10. I hope we don't get duplicates. I hope we don't have like 2 people or 3 people do the same author. But since there are so many authors to choose from, so many illustrators to choose from, and again, with a very small class, that's unlikely to happen. But anyway, we'll see what goes. But I just, like I think I might have mentioned before, I just hope we don't have like 3 people do J.K. Rowling, for example. Then that would kind of defeat the purpose of exposing us to different authors and illustrators. And we're limited in this class by number as it is. And then if we have 3 people do the same one, then we'll be even more limited. Okay, so that's the author profile assignment. So I wanted to make sure I assign that the first week of class, even though it's not due for until next month, really, toward the end of the semester, actually. Okay, the other thing I wanted to touch on by way of introduction, because this is something that will come up throughout our discussions, and it's something that's going to come up in your capsule critique assignment, which is due over the weekend. Reasons why books are banned and challenged. And this applies in more direct relationship to books geared for literature, I'm sorry, for young adults and adolescents. But you'd be surprised how many books that are really geared for children also cause controversy and in some cases actual banning or challenging these books and why they should not be read to or taught in a school system. And again, I mentioned on Monday, I know a couple of you are education majors. I used to have a lot more education majors take this class, but I still think it's, even though I don't have that many anymore, I still think it's a valid and an important aspect to consider when we analyze these books. So a lot of times we'll come across a book and we'll say, whether it's a picture book or whatever, and say, boy, I love this book. I'd love to share this with the children in my life, whether they're, family members, or like I said, if I'm a teacher and I'm putting together a lesson plan and I'm thinking, I'd really like to teach this book in a classroom situation. But of course, one of the questions that obviously has to come up is, would I be able to? Or is there anything about this book that might be offensive or might raise issues in a classroom situation, might arouse parents' concerns, etc.? And how would I deal with those? How would I answer those concerns? Or maybe I might even just decide the issues are too great to take on, and maybe I'll choose another book that would have, less objections. Although I would hope that would be the final, that'd be the very last option. Um, so I always like to give a little bit of a brief lecture on reasons why books are banned or challenged, and then it's something you should relate to and refer back to and remember for the semester, because these will be questions that'll come up, like I said, in the capsule critique. It's the kind of thing you might want to comment on in your presentation subject. And these are the kinds of things I might ask you about on a quiz or on an exam. I ask, an exam question might be, what are some potential objections to teaching the Hunger Games in a classroom situation, for example? So for you to answer that question, you'd have to obviously be familiar with the Hunger Games, but then also be familiar with reasons why books are banned and challenged. So that's why I'm here. That's why they pay me the big bucks. I'm going to go over those right now. So let's go to that. All right. And again, this is something I'm taking from Canvas. So I ask you to look this over for today. And as you can tell, I mentioned this on Monday, I don't have a really big, children's literature textbook for you to buy that's 200 bucks. What I tried to do is take things from different textbooks and incorporate them into the Canvas, so it would save you money, and they could all be in one place for you to see. So you can see, obviously, I took this from a textbook. Here are the general reasons why books would be banned or challenged. And they're listed in the order in which they are most often brought up. So offensive language tends to be the number one reason, or the most commonly mentioned reason why somebody is upset with a book for kids. Then there are objections to works that might be considered sexually explicit. That's a reason. Then third is other, and I always make a joke about other, because the rest of these that are listed are pretty specific. So when it says other, which is the third reason listed, I'm thinking, my God, what did they leave out that could possibly, be mentioned in other? The next one is the only one, as far as I'm concerned, that has some merit, and it kind of affects all the other ones. And I talked about this on Monday, the importance of age appropriateness. And if somebody were to say to me, I don't think this book is really suitable for a child of, I don't know, 8 years old, because I think there are some mature themes in it, or I think there's some mature language in it that they may not be able to process or be able to handle. And so I think this is a good book, but I think it should be read at an older age. That's one criticism that I could understand. And that's why I think it's important that we know our audience and know what they're going through at different stages and times in their lives. That's what your first quiz was all about. Really, you were kind of asked to look over the different stages in childhood and respond accordingly with what kind of books would be good for that age group, so that we can kind of get a handle on kids. And I think that's valid. If somebody were to say, you know what, I don't think this book should be read by anybody under the age of 12. And here's the reasons why I'd say so. I could understand that. But at some point, I think all of these issues, personally, I think should be, shared with kids. But again, the same the same book that might be appropriate for a 12, 13-year-old would not be appropriate for a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, obviously. I mean, that's just common sense. But here again are some of the other potential issues: violence, Satanism, homosexuality. I just mentioned Heather Has Two Mommies, which was, if not the first, one of the first books that dealt with same-sex couples, and of course, kind of opened the door to other works. And of course, now I think that's one of the growing trends in children's literature today, is you see so many more works that deal with same-sex relationships and trans issues and LGBTQ issues, et cetera, et cetera. Some are questionable because they might promote a religious viewpoint. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe has been criticized for that, just to give one example of something we're going to read a little bit later on. Some are criticized because they propose a political viewpoint. And again, other issues might be included, like drugs, racism, nudity, books about sex education. Some works have been criticized for being anti-family, whatever that means, or are insensitive or inaccurate. Some works dealing with suicide have been questioned and banned and challenged. Some have been considered anti-ethnic or racist, flat out racist. Of course, abortion is a very sensitive issue. And so any book that deals with this topic that might be aimed at an older child audience or a young adult or adolescent reader usually gets pretty high scrutiny. And I don't know why I laugh at this, gambling, I don't know. But these are some of the general reasons why books are banned or challenged. I took that from one source, and then I took this list from another source, and there is some overlap. But again, here are some other potential issues that we should be aware of. So like I said, I always tell my students, you might say, I love this book. I don't know why it's on a banned and challenged book list. But think about it. And I don't ask you to agree with the people who would ban or challenge this book, but I think it's important to consider or figure out or understand where they're coming from. What are their reasons? So you can answer them. Hopefully you can answer them. Okay. So again, this is another list, and it somewhat overlaps the other one. Racial issues, any works that seem to encourage racism, encouragement of damaging lifestyles, which is a horrible way of putting what I was just talking about. Blasphemous dialogue, I guess this would have to do with the language. Sexual situations or dialogue, violence, negativity. Presence of witchcraft. I remember, you guys are probably too young to remember this, even if you are Harry Potter fans, but I can remember when the Harry Potter books first came out, there was a lot of criticism about the supposed witchcraft that was used in the book. And it was on banned and challenged book lists for that reason. Interesting, though, as the books continued and became, world phenomenons and very popular, that criticism kind of died down a little bit. I think even the staunchest critics could see that there were also a lot of very positive images and messages in those books, so they could overlook the hint of witchcraft or whatever. Religious affiliations, political bias, and again, the one that I outlined from the other list, age appropriateness. These books have been banned or censored due to their content and the age level at which they are aimed. In some cases, children's books are viewed to have inappropriate themes for the age level. And again, of all the different criticisms, this is one I think we can be most universally accept, regardless of how you feel about censorship issues, regardless of where you are on a political spectrum, and I'm not going to get into politics, but I think we all can agree that, of all of these, that might be the one that we all can agree on. Books should be appropriate to a particular age group. And that's why I think that question is so important in this class. And it'll keep coming up again and again and again. That's going to be probably my first question regarding every book that I have you read is, number one, what would be the age appropriateness for this book? What age and grade would this book best be suited? Okay, and we can talk about that. All right, so those are some of the common reasons, generally speaking, why books are banned or challenged. And then I included also in, if I can find it. I'll share with you here. By the way, let's give you another number. Did I give you 31, the third number, 31? Okay. I'm losing track of my numbers. I included also in your Canvas these files that you can look over. I asked you to look over. I just went over why are books banned or challenged. Sadly, there's an article that deals with this. Book bannings have surged in recent years. They surged in 2021. And I'm sure if you look for more recent data, it would probably just continue that trend, sadly. Interesting, this is just FYI, I would not ask you about this on an exam, but some 6 Dr. Seuss books are no longer going to be published because for various reasons, they're considered to be maybe not suitable to today's audience for whatever reason. Here's a pretty good list of banned and challenged books in the last decade. And let's click on that for a second. We can do that. And again, as I go through these, as I kind of scroll through these, I highlighted some that I'm personally familiar with or have taught in classes, either lit for young adults or children's lit. And Tango Makes Three is a great picture book. Obviously, we're doing Hunger Games. And again, some of these are obviously geared for young adults, probably would not be appropriate for children. But a lot of these are books for kids. I Am Jazz is a picture book. And again, maybe some of you have read some of these. I gotta laugh at this one. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this. I don't know what your tolerance is for bad language, but there's a great picture book called Go the F to Sleep. You can see the YouTube video of this narrated by Samuel L. Jackson. So I recommend that for just fun viewing sometime, especially if you have kids. I don't know if anybody of you have kids, but I think parents can really relate to this. So again, I highlighted some of the works that I've taught mostly in young adult lit. Um, but again, Heather Has Two Mommies. Um, Prince and Knight is a picture book. Um, so again, some of these might have been your favorites growing up. Um, Bad Kitty is a book I think geared for children that's on the list. Um, To Kill a Mockingbird is a book that I always do in Lit for Young Adults. It's a classic, but it is on banned and challenge book lists. All right, so George is a picture book, um, for example. So a number of these do deal with our age range and our children and our children's literature. All right, and while we're on this, oops, shoot, guess I logged out. Okay, excuse me. The other file is a really good website which deals with children's books being banned, and it's more recent. This is like last October. So this would really be a good one to review, particularly if you're, wondering about what you might want to present in your presentation, or maybe, what works you might want to write about in your final paper, and you want to take on the issue of, banned and challenged books. Um, this was really well done. And it gives some examples of the different reasons why books are challenged and some examples of each. So Goosebumps. I usually have students who love Goosebumps. Well, some people would deem that to be too scary. Here are some that have been banned for promoting the occult. Harry Potter, like I said. Bridge of Terabithia is a book that we're going to be reading this semester. Oh, I love the Where the Wild Things Are. Oh gosh, that's one of the great picture books of all time. Again, here are some examples of works that have been banned for LGBTQIA plus issues. So if you're interested in that particular issue and aspect, like I said, there's been a lot of works for children written on that topic in recent years. Objectionable Politics, Too Violent, Hatchet. A lot of boys in my class said, I didn't really read a whole lot when I was a kid, but I really liked Hatchet. Hunger Games. I wonder if any of you have read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and seen the movie. We're just going to do the, by the way, we're just doing the first book in the series, not all of them. So you get the idea. Mature Themes, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Hate You Give. That's another book I do in Lit for Young Adults, right? And they also, this website is really good. If you want to look at works that are considered age appropriate for different ages, you can click on those and find those too. So that's a great website to take a look at as well. All right, so that's my little lecture on reasons why books are banned or challenged. Again, this is something that comes up probably more often in literature for young adults, but as we see, there are titles that are geared for children that are under the microscope of censorship, to use a kind of a broad term. But I mean, it is censorship if you say, we're not going to let you read this for whatever reason or reasons. And we can argue whether each individual reason is a strong one or not. And certainly the age appropriateness argument to me is maybe the most valid out of all of them. But that's just me. We all can agree to disagree on whatever. Okay. All right. And finally, before I get into a discussion of picture books and criteria for judging picture books, which is our first major genre, let me just touch very quickly, very briefly, on something that will continue to be relevant through the course of the semester during different assignments I might give you, or questions I might give you on a quiz, or on an exam, or something you might want to take on as you're writing your presentation of your particular work or your final paper. And that is the concept of literature terms. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I just make it available to you, and you'll see it in Canvas. And so I've made a list, a few years ago. I just brainstormed and tried to come up with as many of the basic literature concepts that I could think of in my 87 years of teaching. And here they are. And I would like to think, even if you're not an English major, and I'm sure many of you are not, although I know some of you are, these have been covered in English classes from grade school all the way through high school, and maybe if you've taken other English classes in college. Basic terms that I want you to be responsible for in case they came up in a discussion, like I said, or in case they were used in a quiz question or an exam question, or maybe some of these aspects might turn out to be a theme that you might want to focus on in your final paper, for example, or in your presentation paper. So, I think most of these are pretty self-explanatory and probably reviews, so I'm not going to take an hour to go through each one of them and define them for you. I would say that one term that I want to make sure we understand what it means, there's a couple actually, so take a mental note of this. When I ask for the setting of a story, and that's a fair question to ask on a quiz, I might ask you, what's the setting of, uh, the Hunger Games? Or what's the setting of Wonder? And what I'm asking you for is not only where it takes place, but also the time period. So don't forget that. It's kind of a two-part answer. Most people will give the place, but in many cases, the time period, especially when we get to historical fiction, the time period can be a very important aspect to consider. So remember that the setting is time and place. And then right after that, another term that I want to make sure you understand what I mean by it. If I were to ask you what the theme of a story is, what I'm asking you for is what is the message or lesson, or to go back to fairy tales and folk tales, Aesop's fables, what's the moral of the story? So in other words, when I ask for what do you think the theme of the story is, and there may not be a specific right answer, so to speak, but it's your opinion. But when I ask you what is the theme of a story or a novel or a picture book or whatever it is, what I'm asking for is what's the message, the moral, the lesson that a child who reads it could take from that story? And so basically, I'm asking you for a statement, some truth, some lesson that would be a statement, would be a sentence. And I think too often, the reason I point this out is too often, if I were to ask you, what's the theme of To Kill a Mockingbird? And if you were to write in your answer, the theme of To Kill a Mockingbird is racism. Well, to me, that's its subject. Do you know what I mean? That's what it's about. The theme is, what is it saying about racism? Or is there a message, or is there a lesson regarding racism that the story is putting out there? So please don't give me a one-word answer if I ask you for theme, okay? I think those are the only two I wanted to make sure that I highlighted. And again, I think most of these are probably review. If you're going through these and you don't know what some of these mean, you Google them and you could get a really quick definition and you'll be all set. If you have any questions about any of these that you want to ask me about, some of the ones that usually come up, I guess I can touch on these real quick. Sometimes people don't know what an anachronism is. And an anachronism, this will come up in historical fiction particularly. An anachronism is anything in the story which really doesn't fit the time or the place, doesn't fit the setting. All right. And it's technically a mistake. Although in more recent times, we've had anachronisms in stories and people kind of overlook it as kind of a postmodern sort of thing. But I guess the best example would be if I were writing a story that was set in the 1950s and I had, let's say it's a group of teenagers in the 1950s and they're listening to the radio and a song comes on that didn't come out until the 1970s, that would be an anachronism. That's kind of technically a mistake, you know. And so that's what anachronism means. But sometimes you see them in works. My favorite example of this would be if you've ever seen the recent Gatsby movie with DiCaprio. Obviously, the setting of that story is New York in the 1920s, the Roaring 20s. But when they have the big party scene, there is rap and hip hop music being played. So that's technically an anachronism, but somehow it works for the scene. So the author, the director, the screenwriter broke that rule and included an anachronism, but it's kind of cool. I think the only other one that sometimes students ask about is in medias res. That's Latin. It means in the midst of things. Sometimes, or a lot of times, you'll have stories that don't have a beginning, middle, and an end. They might begin with some moment of crisis or something exciting going on, and you don't have any backstory. You don't know why these two people are fighting. They're just fighting. It's a great attention grabber. It takes you literally in the middle of the action. And then maybe later on in the story, we go back in time and we find out what they were fighting about and we get the backstory. So that's what in medias res means. I think that should be any of the ones that maybe you're not initially have any kind of information about. Okay, so know your lit terms. These are all fair game for questions I might ask you for an assignment, or like I said, a quiz or an exam or whatever it might be. And some of them might turn out to be the basis for some analysis on your part of a particular work. So in your presentation or maybe in your final paper, you found that the work that you're writing about had a lot of symbolism in it, for example. And so much so that could become the focus of your paper or your presentation, or at least an important part of it. One of the things I loved about this book is its wonderful use of symbolism. So I'll take a little bit of time to talk about the author's use of symbols, what the different symbols are and what they mean, that kind of thing. Or, every work is narrated in some way. Some works are narrated by an omniscient narrator who knows everything, or maybe it's the first person narrator. That's interesting to talk about. Why did the author make this choice? Why is the omniscient narrator a good choice? Or maybe in some cases, we're going to see this in Wonder. Maybe the story is told by multiple characters. Each chapter is narrated by a different character. Why was that done? And why is that effective? And is it effective? I mean, those are the kinds of things that you can hang your hat on. That's the kind of thing you can say. I loved Wonder, and I have different reasons why I love Wonder, and I can use some of these literature terms to pinpoint and hang my hat on, so to speak. So I loved its use of symbolism. I love the fact that its narration is the way it is, the point of view is the way it is, et cetera, et cetera. All right, and it gives me something I can focus on. So that's one of the reasons why we talk about literature terms. All right, so those are easily accessed in your Canvas. Let me give you another number now. Let's say number 40. 40. And while we have a little break in the action, Charlie is nowhere to be found today. So maybe he will still make a cameo appearance for you. But we'll see. Hopefully he will raise his furry face and show up. All right, I want to talk about picture books today, and this will help prepare you for your capsule critique of the picture books. And that's one of the assignments you're doing for the weekend before Sunday midnight. So I ask you to look this over for today. So let's go to that. And this is a file in Canvas. It's also included in the pages in the packet. But a couple of semesters ago, I decided what I'm eventually trying to do in all of my classes is eventually wean away from the packet stuff and have all the stuff I need on a readily accessible file, so people don't have to keep referring to the packet. But anyway, these are the things we use to evaluate picture books. Our first major genre that we're covering this semester. And these are the different questions we can pose. So when we are reading a picture book and at the end we say, well, I really love this picture book. Now I need to express it in some way. I can't just say, well, I loved it. That's one sentence and he wants a couple pages. So this helps you kind of pinpoint and process the different aspects of the book that you liked or maybe didn't like. Maybe you're done reading a picture book and you say, this didn't really work for me. I need some way to express the different reasons why it didn't work. Well, this is really what you'd be talking about. And this criteria will help you put words to the feeling that you have. All right, so a lot of the questions have to do with the content of the picture book. And again, being a picture book, it's going to be mostly illustrations, but obviously there's going to be a story that's told, there's going to be text, etc. So these are the kinds of questions that you should ask yourself as you're reading and after you're done reading a picture book in regards to content. And again, number one, this seems to be a theme today. How appropriate is the content of the book for the intended age level? And what would be the intended age level? So that's a question you may be asked to answer. What age and grade would this picture book be best suited? Because, when we're talking about picture books, we're always, sometimes we're worried that, most of the time we're worried that a book might be too mature for a given age group. But when we get to picture books, you might say, there might be certain picture books that at some point are too kiddie and too childish for a child to read. You know what I mean? So some picture books are geared for very young ones, people who, or even before they can read themselves. Nursery kids look at picture books. So those kind of picture books are not going to interest somebody in the first or second grade, obviously. How is this a book that will appeal to children, or is it really written for adults? Certain Disney animated movies have been called into this question on occasion. A lot of times a Disney movie will come out and critics will say, I don't know that kids will get it, but their parents will love this. There was one called Blue that I saw, and had very, very serious themes to it. And I thought, that was one that I thought, I love this animated movie. And it's technically for kids, but I don't know. I think adults would probably get a lot more out of this than kids would. When and where does it take place? How has the author portrayed this? How and why, or why is the setting important to the story? So this brings up setting. That might be something that's noteworthy in the content. How are the characters well delineated and developed or not? Are stereotypes regarding race, gender, or others present? If so, is this a deciding factor in your decision on whether this is good or not? And of course, a lot of this will come up if we're looking at picture books of a certain age, picture books that came out in the 40s and 50s and 60s, even as late as the 70s and 80s, you know, I don't know, maybe have dated ideas that may make you kind of scratch your head and say, well, I don't know if a child of 2024 maybe should read this, or maybe the ideas are a little bit too dated. Could that be a criticism? Could that be an issue? What is the quality of the language of the text? And what is the theme? And how is it developed through text and illustrations? And again, to refer back to what I was talking about before, when I ask for theme, it's what's the message? What's the moral of the story? What's the lesson? So don't just say the theme of this picture book is love. No, that's what maybe what it's about. That's what its subject matter is. I want to know what the theme is. All right, being a picture book, you can analyze the illustrations and should. All right, so these are the kinds of questions you should ask yourself. And notice most of these questions are not asked in a yes or no fashion. They ask, how is this done? So that requires you to do a little bit of analysis. So don't just say, yes, the illustrations help create the meaning of the text. Be willing and able to explain in a few sentences how it does. That's where your analysis comes in. How are the pictures made an integral part of the text? Do the illustrations extend the text in any way? Do they provide clues to the action of the story? So those are all good questions to ponder as you're reading it. Where the setting calls for it, how are the illustrations authentic in detail? That's the kind of thing you can pick out and discuss and talk about. We'll talk about the style of illustration. And there are different styles of art that are used in picture books. And there was a file I asked you to read for that. So what medium has the illustrator chosen to use? Is it watercolor? Is it cartoon? Is it crayon? What did they use? And why was that effective or not? How has the illustrator used line, shape, and color to extend the meaning of the story? How would you describe the style of the illustrations? Is more than one style used? And I'll review the different styles here in a minute. Is the choice of style used effective, appropriate for the mood, setting, theme, again, of the story? And if there are more than one style used, is that done effectively? What about the format of the picture book? Is there anything that you think is particularly noteworthy about that you want to comment on? How does the size seem appropriate to the content and age level? What is noteworthy, important, helpful about, say, its design, its jacket, etc.? Is the type design well chosen for the purpose, theme, and audience of the book? Also, any comments on the durability and quality of the paper and the binding? So here we're actually talking about the physical copy of the book. And in some cases, this might not be relevant if you're talking about, books you got online or whatever. And I don't know about you, if you remember when you were a kid, remember the pop-up books where each page you'd open it up and things would come out, and you'd open it up and there would be a forest. It was about a forest and you'd see the trees pop up. Of course, those are the most fragile type books imaginable. And usually you put that in the hands of a 2-year-old and pretty soon all the trees are gone and broken up or whatever. So that would be a good example. If you're analyzing a pop-up book, is that effectively done? And then finally, as far as your overall evaluation of the picture book, something else you could comment on, if you're familiar with the author and the illustrator of this particular work, does it compare in any way to any of their other works? You might also do a little bit of research and find out what other people have had to say about the work, particularly if it's an influential work. Something like Where the Wild Things Are, there have been many articles written over the years about the influence and the importance of that particular one picture book, for example. Maybe do a little research and find out what the author or the illustrator had to say themselves about their work and what their inspiration was and whether they thought they were effectively done or not. Will this book make a lasting contribution to the growing body of children's literature? Why or why not? And then finally, and again, this is something we went over on Monday, in addition to how it meets criteria for picture books, since we're dealing with that as a genre, how does it also meet the general criteria that we established on Monday, criteria that we use to judge any work of children's literature, regardless of the genre or regardless of the age group? All right. So I'm not saying when you do your, those of you who will be doing the picture book presentations, for example, I'm not saying that you have to answer each and every one of these questions as part of your presentation. But I think after you've chosen your picture book, you'll see that some of them are more relevant perhaps than others, and those will be the ones you'd want to focus on. So don't misunderstand. You don't have to answer all of these, but these are all questions that are at your disposal, and you can pick and choose which ones you want to answer as part of your analysis. And I think it's good to have all of them in one place. So that's what I did for you there. And again, a fair, midterm question might be, what are 3 different ways we analyze or evaluate the content of picture books? And, I might have a second part to that question. So you'd have to be, knowledgeable of that. So look these over, be familiar with the criteria we use for judging picture books. All right, let's give you another number. Number 50. 50 is our 5th number in the sequence today. All right, since it's a picture book that you're looking at and evaluating, obviously your main comments will be about the illustrations. Certainly you'll want to talk about the text as well. And be aware that there are different styles that an illustrator can choose from when deciding, how they're going to illustrate the given story. And I ask you to look this over. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this is a great website to go to for an analysis of the different styles of art. And here they're all listed with a brief definition. And I think these are all pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to go through each one of these. So one of the first things you can do once you have chosen the picture book that you're going to analyze is see if you can determine what style of art is being used. And maybe it's a combination of styles, or maybe it's postmodern where it's like all over the place. But here are the basic, most commonly referred to styles in art in picture books. And there's the list. And then if you want to go on, you see examples of each one. So like I said, this is a great, great website for styles of art. So here are some examples of abstract expressionism. And then here are some great examples of cartoon style to give you an idea. Maybe some of these you're familiar with as kids. Here's examples of folk art. And notice the kinds of stories that use folk art. Usually folk tales. Go figure. I don't think you need to be a rocket science to figure that out. Some use impressionism. Some art, I think you'll be surprised if you're not already at the detail and the beautiful art that you can see in a lot of picture books. And by the way, I asked you to read about this. I won't talk about this in much detail, but each year, the very prestigious award is given out to the best picture book of the year, and it's usually given to the illustrator, and it's the Caldecott Award. And I guess I might as well bring this up while I'm thinking about it. If you'll notice in Lan Po Po, you see this little gold medallion. That signifies that it is a Caldecott Award winner. So be on the lookout for that. Or you could probably Google Caldecott Award winners and see the most recent list of winners. And again, this might help you determine, what picture books you choose to find in the library or whatever. So here are some impressionistic ones. Naive, looks like a little kid drew it. And some stories benefit from this style of art. And you get the idea. Representational. And again, a lot of these deal with, if I'm trying to be realistic, if I'm trying to tell a realistic story, or if I'm trying to tell a story based in history, I want to try to make it look as realistic as I can. So I'm going to use representational art for that, as you can see. Then retro style, styles reminiscent of the 50s and 60s. Romanticism. Some of these are beautifully done. Stylized. Nappy Hair is a very famous picture book. And surrealism. All right. So these give you some examples of the different styles of art. So be familiar with the different styles of art. That's the kind of question I could ask you on the midterm exam. But more importantly, it's something you can use to help you analyze effectively a work of a picture book. One of the things you're going to comment on is, I identified this work as a work of surrealism, for example. And here's why I say that. And I'll also tell you whether I think it was effectively used or not. So that could be the basis in part for your presentation. Okay. All right. So we went over the criteria we use to judge picture books. We talked a little bit about styles of picture books to call to your attention. Now let me explain the assignment that I'm going to ask you to do for before Monday's class, the capsule critique, as I call it. And this will be a 30-point quiz. And so basically, this shouldn't take you too long to do. It's a very short, concise analysis, but it gives you practice in using the different analytical techniques that we've talked about today. So I'm going to ask you to do this for 2 different picture books of your choosing. And what I'd like you to do is for each one of them, just write brief comments for each of the 10 points. And you can set it up this way. This doesn't have to be written in like a paper format. It would be number 1, list the title of the work, the author, and the illustrator. For number 2, what would you consider to be the genre of the book? Now, obviously, it's a picture book, but might it also be a work of historical fiction? Might it also be a fantasy? Might it also be realistic? Might it also be science fiction, et cetera, et cetera. So, and explain that briefly. So you'd say, not only is this a picture book, but it's also an example of historical fiction because blah, blah, blah. All right, number 3, again, this seems to be a running theme today. What would be the best age and grade for each of these 2 picture books? So do this for each one of them. And explain briefly. So your explanation would show me that you have some idea and some, mastery of the different stages in childhood. So you might say for your first book, this is one that's geared for nursery. I mean, it's really basic. The style is naive. There's very little text. It's all storytelling. Very basic vocabulary. I would say 4 to 5 years old for this book. But then maybe your other picture book that you're sharing with us, maybe it might be much more involved, much more text. much more, maybe higher level vocabulary. And you can have picture books that are aimed for audiences as old as 5th grade, 6th grade. I mean, sometimes we tend to think of picture books as just for real little kids, but that's not really true. So tell me what you think the best age and grade would be for this book and explain why in a couple sentences. All right, summarize the plot for us. This gives you a little bit of practice in plot summary. Then, what are 3 literature terms or concepts that are evident and explain? Now, I say packet page 20. You can go to the packet and find page 20, but actually just go to the file that I just went over, literature terms. So look over that list of literature terms that I gave you, and pick out any 3 that you think are particularly noteworthy and tell me why, basically, apply them to the story. All right, number 6, I've talked about this today. Do you see any potential issues regarding this book that might cause it to be censored or banned or challenged, or there might be any kind of issue, any one of the issues I went over earlier? So take a look at those again. Now, if it's a really innocent, sweet book that has kitties in it and everybody lives happily ever after, you might say, I'm sorry, Shank, I don't see any potential issues with this at all, and I'll accept that. But I want you to be on the lookout for it. So if you do see, it doesn't mean you have to agree with the issue, but you might say, you know what, some people might think this is racist, or some people might think this deals with the occult, or somebody might think this might be a little bit too violent, or whatever. Okay, so at least consider that question for each of the 2 that you do. All right, number 7, comment on any noteworthy use of elements, artistic elements in the story, line, shape, color, etc. And that's covered in page 41 in the packet. And then I think even more important, though, is I would like you to see if you can identify the style or styles of art used, and I just went over those. Number 8, how does the work meet any of the general values of children's lit that I went over on Monday? And how does it meet any of the picture book criteria that I went over today? All right, number 9, do you think this would be a good book? And again, I know this is a teacher type question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would this be a good choice to read aloud, either to kids in your family, or if you are a teacher, to a classroom? Why or why not? And then number 10, here's your chance to be a teacher here a little bit. Grade it based on your observations, based on your comments through 1 through 9. Is it just a wonderful book with absolutely no issues and problems, and it's actually absolutely perfect in every way? You give it an A+. But here's where, be a little bit critical if you can. If there's anything that you think might be noteworthy, any potential weakness, that would be the time, to kind of note that. So you might say, I'm giving this book a B. I'm not giving it an A because, I think it's a good book, but, and then answer the but question. That sounded weird. Answer the but question. Let me give you another number here, by the way, 77. 77 is our 6th number. Okay, so that's the capsule critique assignment that's due over the weekend before class on Monday, preferably by midnight on Sunday. Okay. And just to wrap things up, let me go back to the assignment that I started out with today, and I'll just go back to it again because now it should be clearer about what I'm asking you to do since I've gone over the different criteria, etc. So again, do the capsule critique assignment. That's analysis of 2 different picture books using the 10-point questions that I just went over just now. Also, that I would like you to get started reading The Hunger Games. Read parts 1 and 2. If you want to go ahead and read the 3rd part, the final part, and be ahead of things over the weekend, feel free. But I want to try to break it out. I'm trying not to give you too much to do for each class period. And again, I realize next week's a holiday, so I tried to account for that as well. And then there are a list of very short answer comprehension questions dealing with things that happen in parts 1 and 2 of the Hunger Games that I'd also like you to answer. If you want to put it on the same doc as you did the capsule critiques, you can, or if you want to make it a separate one, you can. But send both assignments on the same email, so I'm not getting a whole bunch of emails. And then there is some reading I'd like you to do that would help prepare us for mythology. All right, so that's the homework. I guess since I have this, I'll just share this real quick. Got so many things posted here. Like I said, we've been very busy these first 2 videos. I think things will be a little bit quicker and more simple starting with next week. But what am I looking for here? Oh, here it is. All right, so read parts 1 and 2 of the Hunger Games. And then these are some very, very quick comprehension questions that I'm going to ask you to write brief answers to. Like I said, in some cases, it might just be a word or a phrase or a sentence. And again, set it up this way. Number 1, answer it. Number 2, answer it. Shouldn't take you too long. If you read part 1 and 2, if you haven't read the parts, then you won't know the answers. But I think after you read parts 1 and 2, these should be pretty easy to answer. And then that will be kind of the focus of my lecture on the Hunger Games and in class or on the video for Monday's video. Okay, so I believe that's it. And again, I apologize if I went a little bit long today, but there were a lot of, like I said, introductory things that I want to make sure we cover in the first 2 sessions. Starting next week, we are going to really get into the different genres. We will share your picture book analysis. We're going to get into mythology, and then we're going to start taking a look at each genre, and it'll be a little bit more structured and a little bit easier to follow, perhaps from that point on. But there were a lot of introductory things I wanted to cover because, like I said, things like literature terms, things like reasons why books are banned and challenged, some of these other issues I wanted to establish now because they'll keep coming back throughout the course of the semester. Okay? All right, so thank you for hanging with me today. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your weekend. And the next video will be Monday, and the assignments are due by midnight on Sunday. And there was one other thing I was going to say, and I forget what it was. Oh, I remember. If you have not emailed me your preferences for the presentations, please do that, your top 3 out of the 4. And remember, we're not doing poetry biography presentations. Okay, please do that so I can figure those out and I can email you all your assignments for the presentations as soon as I possibly can. All right, I guess that's it. Like I said, have a great weekend, and I'll do the teacher wave. Take care, everybody. Thank you.